Hello. Welcome to OJ Studios. Please enjoy A Curse Between Friends by Lacey Julius.
Hey, I'm Ben. I'm 10 years old, and if I had to describe myself, I'd say I'm just your average kid. I'm into video games, hanging out with my friends, and getting lost in comic books. My favorite superhero? That's a no-brainer, Spider-Man. He's this regular guy most of the time, like me, but then there's that other side of him, full of challenges and responsibility. I guess I can relate to that a little more now. This is my story. It all started one afternoon when I noticed something strange about Cody. We were walking home from school, like we always did. Usually, we take our time, chatting about soccer or the latest video game we couldn't stop playing. But ever since we got off of summer break, Cody seemed different. Jumpy. He kept checking his watch and walking faster, like he had somewhere important to be, only he wasn't telling me where. "Hey, slow down!" I called, jogging to catch up. When he glanced back, his eyes were wide, like I'd startled him. Sorry, Ben. I just remembered I got to be home by 3:30. My mom needs me for stuff." That was weird. Cody never had after-school chores, and he never rushed home. His mom was the cool type, she didn't care if he played video games before homework, something my mom would never allow. But I brushed it off. Except, it happened again the next day. And the day after that. By Friday, I was sure something was up. Cody was my best friend, we'd known each other since kindergarten, and it wasn't like him to keep secrets. So, I decided to find out what was really going on. I felt guilty, like I was betraying his trust, but I had to know. After school, I hung back, waiting until Cody turned the corner down Maple Street. Then I followed at a distance, staying out of sight. He was walking fast, checking over his shoulder, but he didn't see me. When he got to his house, he glanced around one last time before slipping inside. I crouched behind the hedge in front of his yard, my heart pounding. What was I expecting to find? Maybe he had a secret hobby or some new game he didn't want to share. But then I saw something that made my heart stop. Through the living room window, I caught sight of a girl, about my age, making her way down the stairs. At first, I blinked, thinking I'd missed something. Cody didn't have a sister, he was an only child. So, who was this girl? She had long brown hair, a charcoal gray skirt, and our school polo shirt, clearly dressed in our uniform. But I had never seen her at school before. Still, there was something oddly familiar about her movements. The way she adjusted her glasses and stood with one foot slightly turned out, exactly like Cody did when he was nervous. My mind raced, struggling to make sense of it, but the realization hit me, as clear as day. This girl was Cody. Somehow, Cody had been turned into a girl. I sat there, frozen, staring at the window in disbelief. My brain scrambled for explanations, none of them made sense. This had to be a prank, right? Maybe Cody had a twin sister he never mentioned. But no, I knew Cody, like the back of my hand, and I have met his family more times than I could count. There was no cousin, or any other family member that looked like her, plus there was something else, this girl. This version of Cody. She moved like him, had his same nervous tics. I couldn't breathe. I had to know what was going on. I stayed behind the hedge, my mind spinning as I tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. Cody was standing there, except it wasn't Cody. It was a girl who looked and acted just like him. Was it some kind of punishment? A prank gone too far? I had to know more. So, I did something that made my stomach churn. I crept closer to the window, just enough to hear what was happening inside. I tried to lean on the windowsill but accidentally tipped over a flower pot, causing a lot of noise. I quickly got up and looked back through the window and suddenly met the girl face to face. For a moment, neither of us moved. My heart raced, and I felt like my stomach had dropped into my shoes. Cody stood there, frozen, her eyes wide with shock. Her face was flushed, like she'd been caught in the middle of something she couldn't explain. And, honestly, so was I. Before I could figure out what to say or do, Cody broke the silence. She stepped back from the window, letting the curtain fall shut. But a few seconds later, the front door creaked open. Then came a small, hesitant voice. It was Cody's voice, except softer, more nervous, and more feminine. "What are you doing here?" I stood there, mouth dry, unsure of what to say. My mind was racing, torn between confusion, shock, and the need for an explanation. Cody, my best friend Cody, was standing right there, except now she was. "Well, she?" I stammered, but I didn't know how to finish. "How do you even begin a conversation like this?" Cody stepped onto the porch, still keeping a bit of distance between us. She looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "You followed me, didn't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt a rush of guilt. "Yeah, I did. But, Cody, what's going on? I mean, why are you?" I waved my hands in the air, struggling to find the right words. "Like this?" She let out a long sigh, crossing her arms over her chest. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it? Because I'm really confused right now," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but the frustration was bubbling up. Cody glanced back toward the door, like she was afraid someone might overhear. She motioned for me to come inside. "You can't tell anyone, then?" "Not yet. Please." I hesitated, but curiosity won out, and I followed her in. The house was quiet, and I realized that Cody's mom wasn't home. It was just the two of us. We sat down on the couch, and Cody took a deep breath before speaking. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said, her voice trembling. "It's complicated." I leaned forward, trying to make sense of everything. "How?" "Cody, one moment you're you, and now I'm not," she finished for me, looking down at her hands. "It's not permanent, it's a magical curse Mom put on me. She said it's a way to keep me focused on my grades, they were bad last semester. Mom put the curse on me, so I'll become a girl every day after school, then it'll stay like this until the next morning before school. Then on weekends I will remain as a girl till Monday morning. By the way, my girl's name is Courtney. Mom picked it, not me." I sat there, stunned, trying to process what Cody, now Courtney, had just told me. A magical curse? It sounded straight out of a fantasy novel or a video game, not real life. But there she was, sitting next to me on the couch, looking just like Cody but not. "Wait," I said slowly, my brain still catching up. "Your mom put a curse on you? Like, an actual magic curse? That's why you've been acting weird?" Courtney nodded, her face a mix of embarrassment and frustration. "Yeah. She got tired of me slacking off, so she said if I didn't start taking things seriously, she'd teach me a lesson." I didn't believe her at first, but then one day, it just happened. After school, I turned into this. She motioned to herself, her eyes avoiding mine. "I can't change back until the next school day." I blinked, trying to absorb it all. "But magic? Isn't that?" I trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence. "How does that even work?" Courtney shrugged, leaning back against the couch, clearly frustrated. "I don't know. My mom's always had these weird talents, but I never thought she'd use them on me. She said it's supposed to teach me discipline or something. To focus on what matters, like school and my future. But turning you into a girl? How is that supposed to help?" I guess she figured it'd be a pretty big incentive to get my act together. Courtney looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time since we sat down. And it kind of worked. I've been keeping my grades up just to avoid having her make this permanent. My head spun. This was too much. "So, every day after school, you turn into Courtney, and you're stuck like this until the next day? And on weekends, you're Courtney the whole time?" Courtney nodded. "Pretty much. It's been a month now. I've just been avoiding everyone as much as possible after school. That's why I kept rushing home." I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. "That's insane. Does anyone else know?" "No, Courtney said quickly. You're the first. I didn't want anyone to find out. I didn't even know how to explain it. I felt a surge of guilt again. I shouldn't have followed her. But at the same time, I was glad I did. I couldn't imagine what she'd been going through, hiding something like this. Cody, Courtney, why didn't you just tell me? She hesitated, biting her lip. Because I didn't know how. And I was scared, okay? Scared that you think I was a freak or that you wouldn't want to hang out anymore. You're my best friend, Ben. I felt a pang of guilt. She'd been going through this alone for a whole month, and I hadn't even noticed. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I should have seen something was wrong sooner. But hey, you're still my best friend, no matter what. I don't care if you're Cody or Courtney. Courtney's expression softened, and she gave me a small, grateful smile. Thanks, Ben. That means a lot. We sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of everything settling between us. I still had 1,000 questions swirling in my head, but I didn't want to overwhelm her. So, what now? I asked after a long pause. Are you just going to wait for your mom to lift the curse? Courtney sighed. I don't know. She said once my grades are consistently good, she'll think about it. But for now, I just have to deal with it. I nodded, trying to wrap my head around the situation. Well, whatever happens, I'm here. We'll figure this out together. She smiled again, a little wider this time. Thanks. I'm glad you know, even if it's a huge mess. We sat there a while longer, just talking, about everything, about nothing, like we always did. And for the first time in weeks, it felt like things were starting to make sense again. Chapter 2, An Idea. Saturday morning came with a feeling of both relief and unease. I woke up early, thinking about everything Courtney had told me. I hadn't been able to shake it from my mind, and honestly, I was still processing the whole magical curse turning your best friend into a girl thing. It felt like something out of a crazy comic book or one of those weird movies we'd make fun of together. But this was real life. I was determined to do something to support her. After all, she was still my best friend, and if this was her life now, I needed to find a way to help, even if I didn't fully understand it. As I sat at the kitchen table, absentmindedly poking at my cereal, an idea began to form in my head. It was ridiculous, probably the craziest thing I'd ever thought of, but the more I considered it, the more it seemed like the right thing to do. If Courtney was stuck like this every weekend, then maybe I could join her? What if I asked Courtney's mom to turn me into a girl too? Just temporarily, of course. I figured if Courtney had to go through this strange transformation alone, it might make her feel better if she wasn't the only one. It sounded wild, but that's what friends were for, right? To have each other's backs, even when things got weird. I couldn't believe I was even thinking about this. Turning into a girl? Was I really willing to go that far? But then I thought about the look on Courtney's face when she told me about the curse, how scared and alone she must have felt. If I could help her by going through the same thing, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. I needed to talk to her first. I pulled out my phone and texted her. Me, hey, Courtney, you up? Can I come over? A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Courtney, yeah, sure. Come by whenever. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door. The morning air was crisp, the kind of early fall weather that made you wish summer wasn't over. As I walked to her house, my mind raced with what I was about to suggest. How would I even bring it up without sounding completely nuts? When I got to her house, Courtney opened the door, already in her girl form, of course. She smiled, but there was a nervous edge to it. I wondered if she was still worried about how I felt now that I knew her secret. Hey, I said, stepping inside. How's it going? She shrugged, closing the door behind me. Same old. It's weird, you know? Being Courtney all weekend and then switching back to Cody on Monday. But it is what it is. We walked into the living room, and I could see she'd been sitting on the couch with her phone, probably trying to distract herself from everything. I sat down across from her, rubbing my hands together, trying to figure out how to say what was on my mind. Finally, I just blurted it out. Okay, so, I've been thinking about something. Courtney raised an eyebrow. Oh? What's that? I took a deep breath, deciding to just go for it. What if? What if I asked your mom to turn me into a girl too? Her eyes widened, and for a second, she just stared at me like I'd grown two heads. Wait, what? I know it sounds crazy, I said quickly, but hear me out. You're going through this all alone, and that's not fair. I was thinking, maybe if I went through it too, even just for a weekend, it might make things easier. You wouldn't be the only one dealing with it. Courtney looked stunned, her mouth slightly open as she processed what I'd said. Then she shook her head, blinking rapidly. Ben, that's insane! You can't just ask my mom to curse you too! Why would you even want to do that? I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady even though I was nervous about her reaction. I don't want to, not really. But you're my best friend, Courtney. If this is your life now, then maybe it wouldn't be so bad if we went through it together. I mean, we've always been there for each other, right? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the gears turning in her head. I wasn't sure if she was about to laugh at me or tell me I was being completely ridiculous. But then, to my surprise, her expression softened, and she smiled, a real smile this time. You'd really do that for me? She asked quietly. I nodded. Yeah, I would. Courtney sighed, leaning back against the couch cushions. I don't even know if my mom would agree to something like that. I mean, she cursed me because I wasn't taking school seriously. But you're already doing fine. Maybe, I said, but it's worth a shot, right? If it makes things easier for you, I'll do it. She gave me a long, thoughtful look, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if she'd agree. But then she nodded slowly. Alright. I'll talk to my mom. But no promises, okay? She's unpredictable. I grinned, feeling a surge of relief. That's all I'm asking. As we sat there, the weight of what I just volunteered for started to sink in. I was really going to ask Courtney's mom to curse me too. It was absurd, but if it meant helping my best friend, then maybe it wasn't so crazy after all. Courtney then got up and motioned me to follow her upstairs. I did so and we went to her room. I was used to it being Cody's room, but now it was different, it was a girl's room. A very girly room. As I stepped into Courtney's room, the changes were immediate. It wasn't just the typical room I had known when Cody was still, well, Cody. Now, the walls had soft pastel tones, and posters of popular girl bands hung where there used to be soccer posters. The bed had a frilly comforter, and there were a few makeup items scattered on the vanity. It hit me again just how strange this whole situation was, but I tried to act like everything was normal. Courtney sat on the edge of her bed and motioned for me to sit in the beanbag chair across from her. I could tell she was still processing everything, and honestly, so was I. You okay? I asked, trying to break the silence. She nodded, fidgeting with the hem of her skirt again. Yeah, just. It's still weird having you in here like this. With me being a girl, I mean. I chuckled nervously. I can imagine. But hey, if all goes well, maybe after I ask you'll be here as what, Brenda or something? Courtney laughed softly, shaking her head. Oh, God, don't let my mom pick your name. She'd probably give you something ridiculous like Arabella or something. We both laughed, and for a moment, it felt like old times. But the weight of the situation quickly returned. I still can't believe you're serious about this, she said after a pause. I mean, I appreciate it, Ben, but it's a lot to ask. I know, I admitted. But you're my best friend, and I can't just stand by while you go through this alone. If there's even a chance it can make things easier, then I want to try. Courtney looked down at her hands again, thinking. I don't want you to regret it, she said quietly. Because once you're in it, there's no going back until the curse is done. I won't regret it, I said confidently, though the truth was, I had no idea what to expect. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let Courtney go through this alone. Courtney looked up at me, her expression serious now. "Alright, Ben," she said. "I'll talk to my mom about it. But, I have to warn you, magic isn't a game. My mom won't take this lightly. She'll want to know why you're really doing this, and if she agrees, well, it'll change things between us. A lot." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words but also knowing deep down that this was something I had to do. "I get it. But I'm doing this because you're my best friend. You're not alone in this, Courtney, and you shouldn't have to feel like you are." She smiled, her eyes softening. "Thanks, Ben. That means more than you know." Courtney and I talked for a few hours until we heard Courtney's mom come home from getting groceries. Courtney's expression tensed slightly as she heard the door open downstairs, and I could see the apprehension in her eyes. "That's my mom," she whispered, glancing at me. "Are you sure you want to do this? It's not too late to back out." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I'd been thinking about it all morning, and despite the craziness of the idea, I felt certain. "Yeah, I'm sure. Let's talk to her." Courtney nodded, though she still seemed nervous. Together, we headed downstairs to the kitchen, where her mom was unpacking groceries. She didn't notice us at first, but when she turned around, her face lit up with a warm smile. "Courtney! Ben! I didn't realize you had company over," she said, her tone cheerful, though her eyes lingered on me a bit longer than usual. Maybe she sensed something was up. "Hey, Mom," Courtney said, her voice steady but nervous. "Can we talk to you for a minute? There's something important we need to discuss." Her mom raised an eyebrow, glancing between the two of us, clearly intrigued. "Of course! What's going on?" Courtney took a deep breath, glancing at me before speaking. "It's about the curse. Ben knows." Her mom's eyes widened slightly, but to my surprise, she didn't look angry, just curious. "I see. And how do you feel about it, Ben?" I hesitated for a second, not sure how to begin. Well, it's a lot to take in, but I want to help Courtney. She's my best friend, and I don't want her to go through this alone." Courtney's mom studied me carefully, her expression unreadable. "And how exactly do you plan to help?" Courtney took over, explaining my idea before I could. "Ben wants you to curse him too. Just for the weekends, so we can go through this together." The kitchen fell silent, her mom's eyes widening in surprise. She looked between the two of us, clearly taken aback. "You want me to place the same curse on you?" she asked, her voice calm but serious. "Ben, do you understand what you're asking? This isn't a game. The magic I used on Courtney is meant to teach a lesson, and it comes with consequences." "I know," I said, my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my chest. "I'm not doing this lightly. I just don't want Courtney to feel like she's alone in this. If going through the same thing helps her, then I'm willing to do it." Her mom studied me for a long moment, as if weighing my sincerity. Finally, she sighed and leaned against the counter. "I never imagined I'd be having this conversation," she muttered under her breath before turning her attention fully to me. "Ben, this curse is no small matter. It changes you, not just physically, but in ways you might not expect. You'll experience things differently, and it's not always comfortable. Are you really prepared for that?" I nodded, though part of me still felt the weight of uncertainty. "I am. I trust you, and I trust Courtney. If this is what it takes to support her, then I'll do it." Courtney's mom was quiet for a long moment, then finally, she sighed, crossing her arms. "Alright, Ben. I'll agree to it, but on a few conditions." "What?" I asked. "Well, first, I can't just do a weekends only version of this curse, it's either you do it just like how Courtney does it, every day after school and all the time on weekends, or nothing at all." "Okay," I said, shrugging. "What else?" "I'll have to talk to your mom and get permission from her too." I froze. My mom! I hadn't even thought about that. It made sense though, especially for something as big as this. But convincing my mom to let me be part of the magical curse? That was going to be a tough sell. Courtney's mom must have seen the worry on my face, because she softened her tone. I know it's a lot, Ben, but this isn't something you can just decide on your own. Your mother needs to be involved. I nodded, swallowing hard. I get it. I'll talk to her. Courtney glanced at me, her eyes wide with concern. Are you sure about this, Ben? Talking to your mom might be even harder than the curse itself. I forced a small smile, trying to seem braver than I felt. Yeah, I'm sure. I just have to figure out how to explain it without sounding completely crazy. Courtney's mom smiled kindly. I'll help you. We can sit down with her together, and I'll explain the magical part. You focus on why you want to do this. I appreciated that offer more than I could say. I wasn't sure how my mom would react, but at least I wouldn't have to explain the magic part on my own. How about this? Courtney's mom started. How about if you and your mom have dinner here, we can talk about it then, together. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and nervousness. Having dinner together might actually be the best way to handle this. My mom liked Courtney's mom, and they'd always gotten along. If we could sit down and explain everything in a calm, normal setting, maybe, just maybe, my mom wouldn't think I was losing my mind. Okay, I said, trying to sound confident. I'll talk to her and see if we can come over for dinner tonight. Courtney's mom smiled warmly, giving me a reassuring nod. That sounds like a good plan. Don't worry, Ben. We'll take this one step at a time. Courtney, who had been quietly listening, finally let out a small sigh of relief. Thanks, Mom. And thanks, Ben. I don't know what I'd do without you. I gave her a smile, trying to shake off the nerves building in my chest. You do the same for me, Courtney. We're in this together. Courtney smiled back, her eyes soft with gratitude. It was still strange seeing her like this, like a different person but still the same friend I'd known forever. And now I was about to join her on this wild ride. As I left her house and headed back home, my mind raced with thoughts about how the conversation with my mom might go. How was I going to explain this to her? And what if she said no? When I got home, I found my mom in the living room reading a book. Hey, Mom, I said casually, trying to ease into the conversation. Hey, sweetie, she replied. How was your day? Good. I was at Cody's house. That's nice. You two spend a lot of time together. How's Cody doing? I hesitated, then decided to just go for it. Actually, Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Something kind of big. She turned to look at me, concern flickering across her face. What is it, Ben? You sound serious. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. You know how Cody's been acting weird lately? Well, there's a reason for it. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's important. My mom set down the book and looked at me. Okay, I'm listening. Well, Cody's mom wants to talk about this at their place. I said, can we go have dinner there? My mom raised an eyebrow, a little surprised by my sudden request. Dinner at Cody's place? I guess we could. But why do I get the feeling this is about more than just hanging out with your friend? I rubbed the back of my neck, trying to find the right words. It is, kind of. I promise everything will make sense once we're there. It's just something we need to talk about together. Trust me, please? She studied me for a moment, clearly sensing the weight behind my words. Alright, Ben, she said, her voice softer now. I trust you. But you better believe I'm expecting some answers. Thanks, Mom, I said, relieved she hadn't shut me down completely. Now, I just had to survive that dinner conversation. As the time for dinner drew closer, my nerves kicked into overdrive. What if my mom thought this whole curse thing was absurd? What if Courtney's mom couldn't explain it in a way that didn't make us all seem crazy? When we finally arrived at Courtney's house, I was jittery, but Courtney and her mom greeted us warmly. They'd set the table, and the smell of spaghetti filled the air, adding a layer of comforting normalcy to the night, though the conversation ahead was anything but. Courtney was wearing a black dress and white tights. She was introduced to my mom as Courtney, but she nor her mother told mom that she was really Cody. That was for later. We all sat down, exchanged pleasantries, and started dinner. It felt like there was an invisible timer ticking down to when we'd have to talk about the real reason we were here. About halfway through dinner, Courtney's mom set down her fork and looked at my mom. "There's something we need to discuss, something about our kids. Well, it's not something you hear every day." My mom looked confused but interested, glancing at me with concern. "Okay. What's going on?" Courtney and I exchanged nervous looks before her mom took a deep breath and began explaining, starting with the curse she placed on Courtney. She didn't sugarcoat anything, but she spoke calmly, describing the magic she used, how it worked, and why she felt the need to teach Courtney a lesson about responsibility. At first, my mom just stared, clearly trying to process what she was hearing. "Wait! Magic? You're telling me you can actually do magic? And you turn Cody into a girl?" Courtney's mom nodded solemnly. "Yes! It's not something I use often, but I've had these abilities for as long as I can remember. I use this particular spell to help my daughter focus on her priorities. And so far, it's worked." Courtney got up and with a wave of her mother's hand she began to change, and before I knew it Cody was now standing there, fully a boy that was currently wearing a black dress and white tights. He didn't have shoes on. His tights-covered feet were on the hardwood floor. I guess his shoes didn't grow in size with him when he becomes Cody again. My mom blinked, clearly grappling with the idea. I don't even know where to begin. This is... wow! But why are we having this conversation now? What does this have to do with Ben? I cleared my throat, knowing it was my turn to explain. "Mom, I know this sounds crazy, but I want to help Courtney. She's been going through this all alone, and I thought if I went through the same thing, it might make things easier for her. So, I asked her mom if she could curse me too." My mom's fork clattered onto her plate. "What? Ben, are you serious?" "Yeah," I said, holding her gaze. "I know it's a huge deal, but I don't want Courtney to feel like she's the only one going through this. She's my best friend, and I want to support her." The room was silent for a long moment, my mom's eyes wide with disbelief. Finally, she looked at Courtney's mom. "And you're okay with this? You'd curse my son too?" Courtney's mom hesitated, then nodded. "Only with your permission. It's not something I take lightly, and Ben would have to go through the same experience as Courtney, changing after school every day and all weekend. I wanted to make sure you understood the weight of that decision." My mom looked at me, her face full of concern. "Ben, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, but... are you sure? This isn't something you can just undo. And turning into a girl? Why would you want to put yourself through that?" I took a deep breath. "I'm doing it because Courtney's my best friend, Mom. She's been stuck dealing with this all on her own, and if me going through it too can make her feel less alone, then it's worth it. I don't want her to have to hide or feel weird about it. I just want to help." My mom was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the idea. Finally, she sighed, looking between me and Courtney. "You're both good kids, and I can see you've thought this through. I still don't fully understand all of this, but if you really believe this will help Courtney, then I'll support you, Ben. But if this gets to be too much, you need to tell me." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Thanks, Mom. I promise, if it gets too weird, I'll let you know." Courtney's mom smiled softly. "I'll take care of the spell tonight. How about if the two, well, girls have a sleepover that way?" She stopped and looked at me, then at my mom. "Sarah, what would you like your daughter to be named?" I looked at Mom, who looked at me. "Brittany," my mom said after taking a few moments to think. The moment my mom uttered the name Brittany, everything felt surreal. I had been preparing for this, but now that it was happening, the weight of the decision settled on my chest like a heavy blanket. Courtney's mom gave me a gentle, understanding smile. "Alright, Brittany it is! Are you ready for this?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second, glancing at Courtney, who gave me a small, reassuring nod. She had been through this for a month, and now it was my turn to share the burden. I nodded, steeling myself. Yeah! I'm ready! Courtney's mom stood up and gestured for Courtney and me to follow her upstairs. My mom stayed behind, looking both proud and nervous, but she didn't try to stop me. I knew she was trusting me to make the right choice, even if it was a crazy one. Upstairs, Courtney and I stood in her bedroom, the room I had once known as Cody's. Now, everything felt different. Courtney's mom closed the door softly behind us and stood in the center of the room, looking between the two of us. Ben, well, Brittany, this won't hurt, but it will be strange at first. I nodded my head and Courtney's mom placed her hand on my shoulder, her expression calm but serious. I felt a twinge of nervousness in the pit of my stomach as I realized how real this was about to get. Close your eyes, Brittany, she said softly, her voice carrying a soothing weight. This spell is designed to feel natural over time, but the first transformation is always the hardest. I glanced at Courtney, who gave me a small, encouraging smile, then shut my eyes, trying to relax. I could feel a strange warmth spread from her hand, starting at my shoulder and slowly moving down through my body, like an invisible current of energy. For a moment, it was as if time stood still. I felt my clothes begin to shift, the fabric stretching and changing, becoming lighter, softer. My sneakers morphed into something more delicate, and my jeans tightened and lengthened into something else entirely. There was a slight pull in my chest, the tightening of my waist, and the sensation of my hair growing longer, brushing against the back of my neck. The warmth intensified for a brief second, then faded, leaving behind a strange, unfamiliar stillness. When I finally opened my eyes, the world felt different. My body felt lighter, my senses sharper, and I could feel the soft, flowing fabric of a dress swishing around my legs. I looked down and saw a pastel pink dress, much like the ones Courtney wore this morning, and small, white shoes where my sneakers had been. I caught a glimpse of myself in the full-length mirror across the room, and there I was, not Ben anymore, but Brittany. My hair was longer, falling softly past my shoulders, and my face was softer, more feminine. My reflection felt like a stranger, but there was also something familiar in the way I stood, the way my eyes stared back at me. Courtney stepped forward, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and excitement. "Wow," she breathed. "You look amazing, Brittany!" I blinked, still trying to wrap my mind around the transformation. "This is so weird," I whispered, my voice slightly higher, softer than I was used to. I raised my hand to my hair, feeling the unfamiliar length, then glanced at Courtney. "But I guess it's real now, huh?" She smiled, her expression full of understanding. "Yeah! Welcome to the club!" Courtney's mom stepped back, a satisfied smile on her face. "You'll get used to it quickly, Brittany. The first transformation is always the most disorienting, but your body will adjust naturally. And remember, this is temporary. After school each day, and on weekends, you'll return to this form, just like Courtney." I nodded, still feeling the weight of it all, but strangely, there was also a sense of relief. I wasn't alone in this now. Courtney and I were in this together, just like we'd always been. Courtney's mom stepped toward the door, giving us some space. "I'll leave you two to get settled. If you need anything, just let me know." As the door closed behind her, Courtney turned to me, her smile growing wider. "So, how does it feel?" I looked down at the dress again, then back at her. "Honestly? Really strange. But not as bad as I thought it'd be." Courtney laughed, and I couldn't help but join in, the tension of the evening finally breaking. For the first time since we'd started this whole crazy journey, things didn't feel as scary. This was the beginning of something completely new for both of us, something we'd have to figure out together. And maybe, just maybe, we'd come out stronger for it. "Let's make this sleepover one to remember, Brittany," Courtney said with a grin, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I smiled back, feeling more at ease than I had all night. "Yeah, let's do it!" As we descended, I felt the soft fabric of my dress swirl around my legs with each step, brushing gently against my skin. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, I felt the weight of everything we had just gone through, but at the same time, a strange sense of calm. The transformation had been overwhelming, but now that it was done, it felt oddly normal. Or at least, more manageable than I'd expected. Courtney and I exchanged glances, and there was this unspoken understanding between us. We are in this together now. It wasn't just her going through the motions of hiding and dealing with the curse, now, we had each other. When we entered the living room, my mom was still seated at the table, talking to Courtney's mom. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me as Brittany, but she didn't look upset, more like she was processing everything. "Brittany?" my mom asked softly, her voice filled with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. I nodded, feeling a bit shy under her gaze. "Yeah! It's me!" She stood up, slowly walking over to get a better look. Her eyes were gentle, and I could tell she was trying her best to accept what had just happened. After a moment, she smiled warmly. "You look beautiful!" That simple statement took me by surprise. I hadn't even thought about what I looked like beyond the shock of the transformation, but hearing my mom say that made me feel okay with it. I managed a small smile. "Thanks, Mom!" She placed a hand on my shoulder, a touch of reassurance. "Are you sure this is what you want? I know you want to help Courtney, but this is a big deal. You don't have to do this if you're not ready." I glanced over at Courtney, who gave me a supportive nod, and then back at my mom. "I'm sure. I want to be there for her, and it's not as scary as I thought it would be. It's different, but I can handle it." My mom took a deep breath, then pulled me into a quick hug. "Okay, sweetheart! I trust you!" We spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt normal, even though nothing about this situation was normal. Courtney and I sat on the couch, chatting like we used to, except now we were both in our girl forms. It was surreal, but it didn't feel as weird anymore. We were still the same friends we'd always been. As the night went on, my nerves faded. This whole transformation was strange, but the more I sat with it, the more I realized that it didn't change who I was. I was still Ben, or Brittany, I suppose, just in a different way. And Courtney? She seemed more relaxed, knowing she didn't have to carry the secret by herself anymore. At some point, we ended up watching a movie, snacking on popcorn, and laughing like it was any other sleepover we'd had over the years. The only difference now was that we were both girls, and for the first time since Courtney told me about the curse, I could tell she felt relieved. She didn't have to go through this alone anymore. We were both now wearing nightgowns. The nightgowns we wore were soft, pastel shades, mine was a pale lavender with lace trim, and Courtney's was a soft pink with tiny embroidered flowers. I hadn't given much thought to what I'd look like in a nightgown before, but now that I was wearing one, it felt natural. I caught a glimpse of us in the mirror on the far wall, and for a second, it was like I didn't recognize myself. But then, I realized it wasn't just a reflection that had changed, it was me. As the movie credits rolled and the night grew later, I realized something important: maybe this whole situation wasn't about the curse itself. It was about friendship, about being there for the people you care about, even when things get weird or complicated. And as I sat there, laughing with my best friend, I knew one thing for sure: no matter what form we were in, we'd always have each other's backs. And that made all the difference. I woke up the next morning to the soft sunlight filtering through the curtains of Courtney's room. For a moment, I forgot everything that had happened the night before. It was like any other morning, except when I glanced down at myself, I remembered I wasn't Ben anymore, I was Brittany. The lavender nightgown still felt strange, but I was starting to get used to the way the fabric draped against me. Courtney was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bed, brushing her hair. "Morning," she said with a sleepy smile. "How does it feel waking up as Brittany?" I sat up, running a hand through my hair, which was longer than I was used to. "Weird. Really weird. But not bad." Courtney grinned. "Told you it gets easier." I chuckled. "I don't know about easier, but it's definitely different." We spent the morning lounging around, doing normal things, brushing our teeth, getting dressed, but everything had a new layer of strangeness. We rummaged through Courtney's closet, and I ended up wearing a pair of leggings and a light blue sweater. It felt odd, but Courtney helped me figure out what to wear and how to move in clothes that weren't as baggy as my usual outfits. By late morning, we headed downstairs, where Courtney's mom was. As soon as she saw me, she gave me a warm smile, and it helped ease some of the lingering nerves. "Good morning, Brittany," she said, as if she'd been calling me that for years. "How are you feeling?" I shrugged, managing a small smile. "Still getting used to everything, but I'm okay." Courtney's mom gave me an approving nod. "You're doing great, Brittany. I know it's a lot, but you're handling it well." "Thanks," I said, feeling a little more confident with each passing minute. After breakfast, Courtney and I decided to go for a walk. The weather was crisp but sunny, perfect for getting some fresh air and clearing our heads. I was still nervous about going out in public as Brittany, but Courtney assured me that no one would notice anything strange. "Just relax," she said as we walked down the street. "You look totally normal. No one's going to think twice about it." I took a deep breath, trying to let go of the tension in my shoulders. "Yeah, I know. It's just hard to get used to this." "I get it," Courtney said, giving me a sympathetic look. "I had the same freak out when it first happened to me. But trust me, you're doing better than I did." We strolled through the neighborhood, talking about everything from school to video games. It felt good to be outside, to be doing something normal, even though I wasn't exactly me. As we walked, I started to forget about the whole transformation thing. It was just like old times, Courtney and me, hanging out and laughing together. That's when I saw him, Ryan, one of the guys from our soccer team. He was walking toward us, a basketball under his arm. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't thought about running into anyone we knew. What would I say? Would he recognize me? But instead he just smiled at both of us, and ran off to be with other boys. The rest of the walk was uneventful, and by the time we got back to Courtney's house, I was starting to feel more comfortable in my new identity. We spent the afternoon playing video games and talking, and for the first time since the transformation, I felt like I could just be myself, whether that was Ben or Brittany. As the day wore on, I realized something important: this whole experience wasn't just about helping Courtney. It was teaching me something about myself too. It was making me think about who I was beyond the surface, beyond my name or how I looked. Being Brittany didn't change who I was on the inside. And maybe that was a lesson Courtney's mom had been trying to teach her all along. That evening, my mom came to pick me up. As we got ready to leave, Courtney pulled me aside, her expression serious. "Thanks, Brittany, for doing this. It means a lot to me." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. "You're welcome, Courtney. We're in this together, remember?" She nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Yeah. Together?" As I walked out the door, I realized that no matter what form we took, Ben or Brittany, Cody or Courtney, our friendship was stronger than ever. And that was something no curse could change. When I got home, I walked up to my room, only to find that like Courtney's room, my room was turned into a girl's room too. As I opened the door to my room, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Like Courtney's room, mine had been transformed. Gone were the sports posters and the clutter of action figures and video game memorabilia. In their place, I saw pastel-colored walls, a soft, floral patterned bedspread, and shelves lined with delicate trinkets and framed photos I didn't recognize. It wasn't over-the-top girly, but it was undeniably different. The first thing I noticed was the dresser. It had dolls neatly organized on top. They all wore girl pink frilly dresses and looked normal in this girly room. Behind them there is a mirror framed with soft lighting. A jewelry stand held dainty necklaces and bracelets, all things I'd never imagined seeing in my room. The closet doors were slightly ajar, revealing rows of dresses, skirts, and blouses hanging neatly on hangers. Even the shoes were different: flats, sandals, and a few pairs of boots lined the bottom of the closet, where my sneakers used to be. In the closet, the only boy clothes there were my school uniform. I know from when I first saw Courtney, that they will change and become girly uniforms at 3:30 on weekdays. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. It was surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. But this was my life now, at least part of it. My mom appeared behind me, her expression soft and supportive. "I guess I should have warned you," she said gently. "Courtney's mom told me the magic would make a few changes here, too. I didn't want to overwhelm you, but... well, here we are." I turned to face her, still a little stunned. "It's a lot. But I'll get used to it. I guess I have too." She smiled warmly. "You're handling this so well, Brittany. I'm proud of you." The name still felt strange on my lips, but hearing my mom say it with such ease made it a little easier. I nodded, feeling a bit more grounded. "Thanks, Mom. I'm trying." She stepped into the room and ran a hand over the soft bedspread. "I'll give you some time to adjust, but remember, you can always talk to me if it gets to be too much. This is a big change, but I'm here for you." I smiled, grateful for her support. "I know! Thanks!" After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the room around me. It was strange, but it wasn't bad. Just different. I got up and walked over to the mirror, taking in my reflection again. Brittany stared back at me, her long hair falling softly around her shoulders. I turned my head slightly, studying the new features that felt both familiar and foreign. This was my life now, and somehow, it was starting to feel like something I could handle. Maybe this room wasn't just a reflection of the curse, it was a reflection of the new chapter I was stepping into. A chapter where I was learning to be there for my best friend and discovering new things about myself along the way. I stood up, taking a deep breath. This room, this transformation, it wasn't going to define me. I would define it. I was still Ben, even if I was Brittany too. And with Courtney by my side, I knew we'd figure this out together. The next morning, I half expected to be Ben again when I woke up, ready to return to school and put this whole surreal experience behind me for a bit. But as I opened my eyes and saw the soft light filtering through my pastel curtains, I realized I was still Brittany. I sat up, feeling the fabric of the nightgown brush softly against my skin, and looked down at myself. Yep, still Brittany. My chest tightened with anxiety for a moment before I reminded myself, this was part of the deal. I just wasn't sure when I will switch back. I got out of bed and went through my morning routine, brushing my teeth, washing my face, but everything felt slightly off, like a dream I couldn't quite wake up from. Looking in the mirror, I still saw Brittany staring back, her hair a little messy from sleep. I brushed it out, fumbling with the longer strands, but eventually got the hang of it. When I went downstairs for breakfast, my mom was already at the table, reading the paper and sipping her coffee. She glanced up and gave me a warm smile. "Morning, Brittany," she said, her voice soft and natural, like she'd been calling me that my whole life. "Morning, Mom," I replied, my voice still sounding strange to my own ears. I sat down and started eating my cereal, trying not to think too much about how different everything felt. "I know what you're going to ask next, and you will turn back into Ben 15 minutes before you leave for school, so make sure you put your uniform on and be ready," Mom said. I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. Knowing that I'd turn back into Ben soon made me feel a little more grounded in all the craziness, but at the same time, there was a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach, a mix of excitement and nervousness. Being Brittany hadn't been as bad as I thought it would be. In fact, a part of me was already getting used to it. I finished breakfast and went back upstairs to get dressed. My school uniform hung neatly in the closet, waiting for me. It felt odd pulling it on over my still feminine body, knowing I'd soon be switching back. I straightened the tie, ran a hand through my long hair one last time, and glanced at the clock. 15 minutes until the change. I stood there in front of the mirror, waiting, feeling a little like Cinderella at the stroke of midnight. Slowly, I could feel it happening, the warmth spreading through my body, the subtle shifting of my clothes and features. My hair shortened, my boyish frame returned, and within moments, I was looking at Ben again. I let out a long breath, staring at my reflection. There I was, the same as always, or at least on the outside. But after everything that had happened, I didn't feel quite the same. I felt different. Stronger, maybe. Like I understood something about myself that I hadn't before. I grabbed my backpack and headed downstairs. My mom was waiting by the door, smiling gently. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah. Ready as I'll ever be." As I stepped outside and headed to school, I couldn't help but think about what the rest of the day would bring. I'd be been again at school, back to my usual self, but once the final bell rang, I knew Brittany would return. And this time, it didn't scare me as much as it had before. As I walked to school I saw Cody. Cody was standing near the corner, waiting for me as usual, but something about his posture felt different today. He looked more relaxed, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. I wondered if knowing that we were both in this together had made him feel a little less alone. "Hey!" I called out, jogging up to him. "Hey!" Cody replied, giving me a small, knowing smile. "So, how was your first weekend as Brittany?" I chuckled, feeling the strangeness of the question. Weird. Definitely weird, but not as bad as I thought it'd be. Thanks for letting me in on everything. I get it now. Cody's grin widened a bit. Yeah, it's still weird for me too. But knowing you're there, it helps. We started walking towards school, the usual route we always took, but this time it felt like there was something different between us, not in a bad way, just more understanding. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all, I admitted. Like, switching back and forth, being Brittany after school and Ben at school. But I'm glad I did it. You've been going through this on your own for so long. I don't want you to feel alone in it anymore. Cody glanced at me, his expression thoughtful. You're a good friend, Ben. Or Brittany. Whatever. He laughed. This is all still kind of crazy, but I'm glad you're here with me. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I couldn't help but wonder what the rest of the week would be like. Switching between Ben and Brittany wasn't just about appearances, it felt like it was changing the way I saw things, the way I interacted with the world. And I wasn't sure if that was good or bad yet. As we approached the school, Cody gave me a quick, reassuring nudge. Ready for another day of pretending everything's normal? I smirked. Yeah, as normal as things can be, I guess. The day passed in a blur of classes and homework, and for a while, it was easy to forget about everything that had happened over the weekend. But as the final bell rang, a familiar anticipation built in my chest. I glanced over at Cody, soon to be Courtney again, and gave him a nod. We both knew what was coming next. We hurried to my house and as soon as I got inside, I could feel the familiar warmth of the transformation begin. The subtle tingling sensation spread through my body, and within moments, I felt the shift back to Brittany. The school uniform adjusted itself into a more feminine version, my slacks became a pleated skirt. And my hair grew out once again, brushing softly against my neck. Cody stood next to me, his transformation into Courtney happening just as quickly. As we both finished changing, we exchanged glances, an unspoken understanding passing between us. This was our new normal now, and it wasn't as scary as it had once been. Courtney gave me a small smile, adjusting her skirt. You ready for another afternoon of being, well, us? I chuckled, feeling a little more at ease than I had the first time. Yeah, I think I am. We dropped our backpacks in the hallway and headed to the living room, where we planned to do homework together. But before we could settle in, my mom peeked into the room. My mom smiled warmly at the two of us, clearly more at ease with the transformations than I expected. Hey, girls, she said casually, as if this was just a normal day. Do you want a snack before you start your homework? Courtney and I exchanged amused glances. It was still surreal hearing someone refer to me as a girl, but I was starting to get used to it. Sure, Mom, I replied, feeling a little shy. That'd be great. We sat down at the kitchen table, and as my mom prepared some sandwiches, Courtney leaned over and whispered, Your mom's handling this pretty well. I nodded. Yeah, I was worried she'd freak out, but she's been really cool about it, Honestly, it's making this whole thing a lot easier." Courtney smiled, her eyes soft with appreciation. "I'm glad! It's already so much better having you in this with me. I feel like I don't have to hide anymore." I knew exactly what she meant. Even though I'd only been Brittany for a short time, it already felt like a huge step toward understanding what Courtney had been going through. We weren't just friends dealing with some magical curse, this was our new reality, and we were in it together. After we ate, we settled in to do our homework. The afternoon passed quietly, and before long, it was time for Courtney to head home. As she gathered her things, she gave me a thoughtful look. "You know, Brittany, I was thinking, maybe we could try something different this weekend." I raised my eyebrows. "Like what?" "Well," Courtney began, a little hesitant, "I've been kind of hiding out whenever I am in my girl forms. But since we are now in the same boat, what if we went out, like, actually went somewhere? Just to see what it's like?" My heart skipped a beat. Going out in public as Brittany? That was a big step. "You mean, like to the mall or something?" Courtney nodded, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "Yeah, or do normal stuff that we did as Cody and Ben, like go to the indoor water park but as Courtney and Brittany." I hesitated, unsure if I was ready for something like that. But then I thought about everything we'd been through so far. I'd already taken a huge step by becoming Brittany in the first place. Maybe it was time to take the next one. "Alright," I said, feeling a nervous thrill in my chest. "Let's do it!" Courtney grinned, clearly pleased that I'd agreed. "Awesome! It'll be fun, I promise!" We said our goodbyes, and as Courtney left, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and anxiety about the weekend ahead. Going out in public as Brittany felt like a huge deal, but with Courtney by my side, I knew I could handle it. Besides, I had to prepare, I was going to be turning into Brittany again and again for a long time.